Social Justice Goblin, welcome to the backyard. So, I am a mark. So to get back how much of a mark I was back when I was a teenager, because I assumed all this stuff was real, what good mark wouldn't? I grew up in Holland, and I've told this a little bit, and the wrestling, that all I got for wrestling was superstars, man. When you got to see some of the superstars go at it, that was a big deal. That was like WrestleMania or Survivor Series. I mean, when you got to see that, you're like, yeah, that's the stuff. And so, like, when you had a Saturday main event, ooh, that was a good wrestling weekend. And when you missed that, you were bummed because you had to watch it live. I didn't have a VCR. Only way I could watch wrestling was watch it live. That was back when I could watch anything. But I watched it live, and that was that. My family knew that when wrestling was on, that was my time to watch TV. And, you know, when I was restricted from television, it sucked. But I loved wrestling. So, but yet I have a consummate memory of 87, 88, 89, and 90 wrestling. Not so much 90. And then I have very good memories of certain other eras because I was actively a wrestling fan. Tell you the truth, the first time I saw an NWA event, it was on the WWE network. All those great matches, I had to watch them on the WWE network or off YouTube. And they were great matches. But the way I consumed my wrestling diet was through the Abner mags. Yes, I bought all the Abner mags. Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler, random wrestling magazines that I found in the store. Because that was one nice thing about Holland was they just sold off in the newsstands American English stuff, so you could get stuff like wrestling magazines and stuff like that because there was a market for it and everyone read English, so it sold. It was the same way I got my comic books. I would just go in the local economy and buy them. I mean, when you live in Europe, you have to do as Europe. Ironically, I couldn't get British stuff as easily as I could get American stuff. And there was newsstands everywhere. Good money. And they were just large shops filled with magazines. And so I consumed the living hell out of it. And so this is an interlude because wrestling journalism has a very interesting history. Because there's been journalism in wrestling for as long as there's been wrestling. At first it was them playing the journalists for rubes. And then over time, it evolved into what we saw was with the Abner mags, where the journalists were reporting, but they were reporting what was being told to them by the sources. So they were reporting on the storylines, on the different matches, talking about wrestling history. That's why you understand history, developing the characters. You know, that's why I love Jim Cornette so much, because the way they just wrote Jim Cornette, you were just like, you know. And Jim Cornette is more amazing than he was written about. And I still remember how he won the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Manager of the Year award, where all of a sudden, mysteriously from Louisville, Kentucky, a whole bunch of ballots came in hinting that his mom bought the trophy for him. And, you know, seeing wrestlers in the Pro Wrestling Illustrated shirt reading the magazine was a big deal. Journalism And Pro Wrestling Illustrated is still published to this day. It has changed. It's not Abner style anymore. The Abners are long gone from wrestling now. But, you know, it's still, I mean, I would love to be on a cover of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. That would be like an absolute dream on a Pro Wrestling Illustrated cover. I would just, because I'm a fan of wrestling journalism. So also what was going on at that time frame, which I didn't partake until I got to the university. And this is where I'll continue the story. There was the dirt sheets. They're still called the dirt sheets. Or the sheets. Pro Wrestling Illustrated, not Pro Wrestling, the Wrestling Observer, and then the Pro Wrestling Torch. And there's been some other offshoots, I guess. I don't know. I don't read much of pro wrestling. I canceled my subscription to the Observer. I still get the Torch, and I love reading the Torch, but it's like I got to be in the mood, and so I just keep getting them and like putting them like, not today. But you know, it's fun to sit down and read about the matches in the Torch, and he doesn't really, I mean, I'm sure he has his news stuff that he does that he gets paid for, but I just want the newsletter. And so that's and if I get my wrestling news, I get it through this YouTube channel, WrestleLamia. And you know, I get stuff that pops up in my little, like, when I'm looking for news articles to read, wrestling news pops up and I read it, and oh, okay, that's cool. But because the sheets gave you a different, that was the thing. Then I moved to the university and I discovered Rec Sports Pro Wrestling on the network news groups, and I joined in the discussions, and you know, they basically groomed you to understand the business, kind of. You know, they were the smart marks, and I became a smart mark, and I've always been a smart mark. And so I got subscriptions to the Observer and the Torch and read them every week. It was just part of my routine. I'd get them in the mail and like, open them and read them up, and then go on Rec News and talk about wrestling with people. You know, and then watch wrestling, and then, you know, discuss what matches were good. You know, it was a small wrestling community on the internet. But I was finally getting to see wrestling, and I loved the WCW. Always have, even in its goofy phase. I mean, the Faces of Fear. Man. Kellen Sullivan with Woman was amazing. Kellen Sullivan was an amazing worker. But Faces of Doom was a little... I mean... And then when Bischoff took over, it got to be a different product that, you know, and then we had the Outsiders. And anyways, why am I talking about 90s wrestling, you know? So but then I quit then in 2000 I quit wrestling. I was just like, I've had enough, you know. Like, I like WCW and it's gone now, and you know, I'm not feeling this WWF right now, you know. Just, you know, this new Attitude Era is kind of cool, but just things are making me uncomfortable, and so I bowed out. And I'd watch wrestling every once in a while and be like, oh, this is good, and then watch a couple episodes and then like not watch wrestling. And I didn't consume any wrestling journalism. Honestly, the only wrestling journalism I consume is I still read Pro Wrestling Illustrated from cover to cover. Still love looking at the rankings because that's part of the fun. And that's how you got to know all the wrestlers, because you look at the rankings and it's publicity for the wrestlers. You know, and that's why I knew who was in what fed, because I read the rankings. And it's 10 people. And the Abnormalities covered a lot. I mean, they covered Stampede Wrestling. And make watching Stampede Wrestling enjoyable. Because I understand a lot of their storylines, especially the Owen stuff. I mean, oh my God, did they rave about Owen Hart. Owen Hart was hyped to the nth degree in the magazines. I knew Owen Hart before Owen Hart, and it was just a matter of time. We all knew he was Bret's brother, and he was just amazing. That's the power of Abner Mags. They could get guys over. Because we were all dumb marks. And that's the way wrestling should be. Dumb marks, I guess. You know what? It's entertainment, I guess. It's not entertainment. It's wrestling. Enjoy it for what it is. Enjoy the fact that it has journalism attached to it. And actually has serious journalism. I mean, Dave Meltzer is a serious journalist. You should hear his journalism integrity speeches. I know there's accusations that he's in on the work. But, you know what? Who cares? It's wrestling. Enjoy it for what it is. You get more entertained. If keeping up on the dirt sheets keeps you entertained like it did me, then keep reading those dirt sheets. And you know what? If you want to get good recaps of wrestling matches, read the Pro Wrestling Torch. Amazing recaps. And, yeah. Pro Wrestling Illustrated is really good, too. So, there we go. A little ramble about Wrestling Journal.